So I'd like to make a video on the weapons of this season, particularly just the two firearms because the other weapons aren't here yet, and also a reskin of one and information about one that is within the season but is modified to a bigger extent. So before I get on to that, actually, I do have major lag, which will ruin a little bit of the presentation, but it's not too bad at the very least. But it is constant, as you can see on the, well, icon in the top left of my screen. But anyways, let's actually get on to the talking. First up is the collateral damage assault rifle, which is a mouthful of a name. I really wish they'd, make it smaller, but it's whatever. And the first good thing I have to talk about it is its fire rate. That is, in fact, a really good fire rate, as I do believe that replicates a lot of M4 AR-15, platform weapons that are, fully automatic ones, of course. But yeah, it's pretty good. But there is three things I have to talk about it, and then I get on with nitpicks and details with this weapon. First up, the magazine that you stick in is gone for 2 seconds. The bolt doesn't move when you fire it, or wreck the charging handle. Which, by the way, whoever is animating these weapons, whoever is adamant on using the charging handle, I commend you because, it's really satisfying to see it be wrecked, even though the bolt release is just as satisfying, if not more, a little bit. But it does make it more unique in the realm when everyone with AR style weapons uses the bolt release. So, yeah. And there's a third bug, which I have to drop the weapon to actually show you, which it still is visible when you hold it in the character's hands, but it's more visible when I drop it. There's a speed grip for some reason where the pistol grip is. It's kind of ass because, I mean, it should actually be on the hand guard, but I mean, the weapon is animated to hold this weird aftermarket part on the magwell, which really sucks that it's there, which is one of my nitpicks, but more on that later, because I believe the reason why they do this is because maybe every single weapon is like supposed to be off the rip ready and be compatible with ballistic. Because I mean, the iron sights are a separate model, and the Picatinny rail also isn't like coded to take the wrap. So there is that. However, the magazine is proprietary to this weapon. It's a custom model, which is oddly a pseudo quad stack because that is way too thin to be a quad stack, and it's also a double stack to single stack feed for whatever reason. Maybe not impossible, but definitely weird for a AR platform rifle. And on top of that, the buffer tube I believe is way too small. It should probably be bigger, but I mean, it's whatever. It's just a small thing. And there's also missing a forward assist for some reason. But I mean, older M16s did have no forward assist, so it's not impossible. And a weird thing is that the selector is like an HK416 style selector, even though this little part is squared off and not rounded. So, yeah. And it's also not on the left side where it's supposed to be. It's on the right side for whatever reason. Probably because this is a third person game. But either way, it's there. And also the bolt release and mag release is ambidextrous. It should look more like how, you know, this AR looks, where this is the mag release on the opposite side, which is the part where it sticks out, and then that's where the bolt release looks on the left side, and there's absolutely zero on the right side, and that's how the mag release is supposed to look on the right side. Which, by the way, this bolt is very tiny, which is funny as shit because it's not supposed to be, but that's just showing off old Fortnite weapon like details. The fact that it has no rear sight, actually, it's just the sight protector and carry handle, and there's no selector on either sides. But, again, that's old Fortnite. It's supposed to be cartoony. They don't have, like, pseudo realism in their weapon designs nowadays as they do. Because, I mean, this even has an adjustable gas block for whatever reason. But it's very cool that it does, even though you can't adjust it because the handguard is blocking the way of it because the lever for it is way too long. It should be shorter, but again, this is way more detail than ever necessary in a Fortnite weapon, so the fact that it's even there is, you know, better than a lot of Cold War's details and anything that Treyarch and Sledgehammer will ever do in their entire lives with making weapon designs because Call of Duty sucks ass. And Infinity Ward is still ass, but better and is the lesser evil, at least when it comes to their weapon designs. So, yeah. And another nitpick is this hand stop that is on the foregrip slash handguard slash furniture, whatever. It's really weird. It has a poorly modeled Picatinny rail and it has like spikes at the end, so that's really weird. And on top of that, is there's a texture for the pin where the upper receiver and lower receiver meet on both sides, and there's also a extra modeling bit, which is necessary because I do believe these are supposed to be flush with the receiver. At least maybe the back one isn't supposed to be, but you know, yeah. And also this bolt is really big in contrast with the earlier AR that I just shown of Fortnite's original, more cartoony-ish but pseudo-realism. But now it's more pseudo-realism and vaguely cartoony. It's really weird. I don't even know if I'm using pseudo right, but either way, it isn't like a proper AR bolt. But again, this is more than necessary because you're not going to really see it, and the bolt doesn't even move anyways in general. So, yeah. The final thing I like to talk about this gun is the fact that the iron sights aren't properly attached. I mean, I do believe they are like closely attached, but the screws are way too low and are actually being like stuck into the gun, even though you don't see them because they're not fully modeled like previous screws on the guns, like how the red dot has screws, and I believe the P2X and etc. And this one doesn't even have a post. It just doesn't have no indent. It's just straight through the gun, which is really unfortunate. But I would like to point out that these are at least really close to the original M16 iron sights, but obviously modified just to be more modernized and removable because they aren't removable on this style of weapon, of course. So that's actually a really cool nod, and I do appreciate the design. And to finally talk finally about this gun before moving on to the next one, this is how it looks in first person. This just feels right. There's nothing else to talk about besides feels right. So I really hope this gets added into ballistic as maybe one of the first iron sight uh, ARs because I really prefer how iron sights work in ballistic because honestly the movement and accuracy thing is kind of ass because they could have just been original with their like first person S&D type mode, but instead they wanted to copy Counter Strike for whatever reason. So the next weapon I'm not going to talk too much about because I mean it's a semi-auto version of an L96A1, but there is a few things that we'll talk about. First up is the fact that it is semi-auto, but the bolt doesn't move for whatever reason, and it's also the exact same bolt as on this AR, the collateral damage. So it's an AR bolt on a op, which is gross. You don't rack a charging handle, you just slap the mag, and there's this weird like chin rest part where the bolt like charging handle should be to where you actually rack the bolt, and it makes the gun look way more chunkier than it needs to be, especially from a third person sense, since it's not as chunky as the actual receiver part is. So that sucks ass. But I mean, it's whatever. Not much to say since it's only vaguely trying to attempt to look like an LNA6A1 because the front is more rounded. It looks more like the Hunter bolt action from the earlier seasons. And again, it's semi-auto, so yeah. It also weirdly has an inverse HK style like charging handle hold, so you can slap up if you wanted to if you lock it back. But I will say the fact that the charging handle is connected to the bolt, even though you can't see it because of the modeling of the receiver, because it lacks a hole there, is really crazy. And before I move on to the scope, this is just a retextured, a Reaper sniper rifle magazine, which is funny. It's because the only other thing that actually uses the sniper magazine is the boom bolt or whatever the like crossbow is for. Well, yeah, just from the season of Wrecked, it uses this magazine. So, yeah, this is the third gun to actually use it, but it's not modular at all because instead of, fixing modular weapons, they said just scrap it entirely because, that works. They could have just made it work like Apex to where you could attach the modular like attachments on the gun by yourself and not just have to go to a mod bench that is, just only late in the match or you had to fight a boss for it, which is absolutely dumb. And these mods did not help that much to warrant the like wait time or effort to get to the mod benches. So, yeah. And also the fact that the magazine does not reach the bolt at all. There is way too long of a distance for it to go into a follower and be grabbed by the bolt. So there is that on top of it. The final thing I'd like to talk about this gun is the fact that the screws are at the right height, but they're actually going through the post and not the indents. That's, it's not how you attach a Picatinny. That's not how you attach attachment to a Picatinny rail, which is absolutely unfortunate. I do believe the screws maybe are fully modeled. I don't know because like it's really hard to look through the modeling, but I do see that the screw is textured right there and it's clearly going through a post just as much as this one. The fact that they're going through the post in the same like ish sense is huge though, because I mean at least that's proper. But yeah. And also I do believe this weapon again is also supposed to be modular because the scope itself is a different model. Maybe that's just because that's how it's supposed to work with a view model, and they want it to be readily available for the view model, so scopes and other optics are going to be differently modeled and different from the weapon. So maybe that's how they do it, which is really cool if so. But either way, the final thing before moving on to the next one, like the true final thing, because it's not talking about the weapon anymore, is just how it looks in first person. And how there's also a glitch in first person where it does that. The Picatinny rail and the actual gun itself just disappears, but the scope doesn't. So, yeah, that's basically the final thing. Moving on to the different weapon, which returns this season, is the modular striker burst rifle, but it's not modular. It just has a permanent red dot attached to it and is hit scan, which I really hope they either add that into creative, but preferably to not bloat the weapon count. They just add an ability to change projectile weapons to hit scan, and maybe vice versa if you want to punish yourself and be a masochist because projectile weapons absolutely suck, and I don't know why anyone ever loves them. Everyone was complaining about them for Chapter 5, so I don't see why anyone even remotely enjoys them. But either way, the fire rate is faster on it due to the fact that the weapon in the Battle Royale is technically the exact same weapon. So this one gets updated inherently, just kind of like how the burst rifle did, the OG burst rifle, because it sounded like there was like 3 shots happening, and you'd reload it again, but there wouldn't be 30 rounds. So really, hopefully, they make the FAMAS have a 3-round burst again, because a 2-round burst is just cursed as shit, and 20 rounds in the mag is absolutely ass. So hopefully, if they ever add this into ballistic as well, they instead make it 3-round burst and have 30 rounds in the magazine as God intended. And another thing is that this weapon isn't fixed, just like how Fenix's like kicks compatibility isn't fixed. It's not like Volpez's, which is absolute dog shit, because Volpez's is the better way to handle it, and Fenix still looks like he has twigs for legs, which is absolutely ass, but the reload isn't fixed on the Enforcer AR. And finally, better to show off in first person is the Mammoth pistol, which is Baron's double down pistol, because this is the mythic version. It has 2, which is kind of like how the augments allowed in the season that this came in, which was, I believe, Chapter 3, Season 2, or Season, I don't know. Forgot, because I really cared little about the Wild season. But either way, since it has 2, the hammer goes to the fired position, and you don't cock it for the next round. And also, if I look up, you can still very clearly see that it only holds one bullet, which is a weirdly modeled bullet, by the way. But it doesn't have any extra additions to have a secondary barrel or a secondary chamber. Holy cow, that is a weird bullet. But again, it doesn't matter. It's a mythic pistol, so it's going to be different and special, so it doesn't need to be modified. But I would like to see them maybe recock the hammer, as that could potentially balance this pistol for having two shots, because it's not an augment anymore. But also, it is a mythic, so it's supposed to be a little bit better than all the other weapons. So, you know, it could just be left as is, and that's fine. Doesn't need to be fixed. However, the final thing I'd like to say before I do end the video, though, is that when you go into the mod bench with these weapons, it does show off that it has the speed grip for some reason, and this does show off that it has a scope, not a new one, but a scope in general. And this weapon in particular, the one I'm holding right now, shows off the P2X optic. So hopefully, all the modular weapons eventually get the ability to have the P2X optic once again, because the P2X optic is the best optic. And since mods aren't going to be, unfortunately, reintroduced to BR, having the P2X optic on all modular weapons would be dope as shit. Because, I mean, again, it's the best optic. Every other one is just kind of meh. That's about it.